us live on City 97.3 FM. You're also watching us live on Facebook on City 97.3 FM or MEST Africa. It's always a pleasure bringing you another session of Edtech Monday. Now, this month we are speaking on the topic advancing girls' education through digital learning. Now, the International Day of the Girl Child is commemorated annually to spotlight and bring attention to issues that matter to girls amongst government, policymakers, and the general public. It's also an opportunity to make the voices of girls heard and to focus on addressing challenges that girls face. Now, this year's Day of the International Day of the Girl Child was on October 11th. Under the theme, "Our time is now, our rights, our future." Now, to advance this conversation today, we'll be talking about advancing girls' education through digital learning, and it's all part of Edtech Monday, which is a platform for Edtech entrepreneurs, education stakeholders, and government reps to facilitate critical conversations on the use of technology for teaching and learning. Now, it's an initiative of the Mastercard Foundation, Regional Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in ICT, and part of the foundation strategy to find solutions to Africa's youth employment by closing the gap in access to quality education and advance the integration of technology in education policies across Africa. So to realize all of this, the Mastercard Foundation is partnered with West Africa to bring you Edtech Monday, airing on the last Monday every month. So like I said earlier, we'll be getting into ways that we can advance the education of girls through digital education. You can join the conversation by sharing your thoughts and comments or questions via SMS 0549 986 996. You can also drop a comment on the Facebook stream on MEST. African Science Academy. Now, the African Science Academy is headed by Ms. Gifty Kansa, who joined ASA with an extensive experience as an educator in the UK and in Ghana. She was most recently vice principal and head of mathematics at a leading academy in London, where she taught for 14 years. Gifty believes in an education that develops students academically, emotionally, and mentally to prepare them for the challenges and opportunities they will go on to face in the world of work and in life in general. Gifty, good morning and many, many thanks for joining us today.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
Great. Our next panelist is Miss Muniratu Isifu, Programs Director at Comfort Ghana. Now, Muniratu Isifu is the Programs Director for Comfort Ghana, where she leads the planning and delivery of holistic programs to support girls and young women to succeed both in education and in their livelihoods. Prior to joining Comfort, she worked as a director of partnerships with Plan International Ghana, and she was previously the country director of Vaki Foundation in Ghana. Muniratu, good morning and many, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And our final panelist is Linda Anson, co-founder of STEM Bees. Now, as an alumni of the KNUST, she graduated. She has a BSc in Stats and Actuarial Science and an alumni of the Meltwater Entrepreneurial School of Technology, where she did software entrepreneurship class of 2014. Linda Anson followed her passion for STEM and co-founded a tech company called Best Tracker, a software as a service company for the freight industry. During her studies in both institutions, she realized the gender gap in STEM, and rather than complain about the problem, she went ahead to co-found a non-profit that empowers and trains young African women in STEM education. And that that non-profit is the STEM Bees organization. Linda, many, many thanks for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much. Great. We appreciate your time and everybody who's joined us. Let's begin with the statistics that I shared in the introduction. For those who missed, the average stats are that in sub-Saharan Africa, 32.6 million girls of primary and lower secondary school age are out of school. The number rises to 52 million when considering the girls of upper secondary school age, which according to the UNESCO in 2019. So my first question is that when we look at the statistics, what is our reality when we interrogate the data on primary and secondary education on girls in general? And how many of our girls at this level have access to digital learning. So first of all, let me take Muniratu's comment, and then I take a comment from Linda.
Thank you, and good morning to listeners. So I think the situation you looked at globally is not so different nationally in our country, Ghana. Our situation could even be much worse than the global situation. I think that if we want to even look at very recently, on the International Day of the Girl Child, the Ghana Statistical Service came up with with a press release that looked at data they collected during the population and housing census in 2020. And a lot of people were shocked to see some of the figures that they presented, even though these are figures that we have lived with, and we've known some of these things through MEST data that the Ministry of Education collects. And according to what they shared, we have about 250,000 girls who are still out of school in this present day. So that means that these are girls who have still not been able to access education, and they are living with us. And the majority of these girls, we are told, are found in the three northern regions: Savannah, Northeast, and the northern region. I would look at this even in terms of, so these are those that haven't been able to go to school. But even for those that are in school currently, I mean, there are still challenges. Even though we've done well as a country in terms of getting a lot of people into school, but quality has had to suffer for it. Quality has gone down, and we are told that from data that even though we are achieving parity across the levels of education, both at the basic and then the secondary level, the numbers of girls and boys seem not to vary much. But we know that our students are in school, but they are really not learning. We've been told about learning poverty, and COVID has even made it worse. So in terms of, from reports that UNESCO published, that is the global learning poverty updates that they gave for 2022, the situation did not look good at all in that report, that we have a lot of people who go through school and come out of school and haven't really learned much. In Ghana, for people who go through about 11 to 12 years of schooling, if you want to look at them in terms of actual learning they did, they actually learned half of the period. So it means that's about 6 or so years lost of learning. So people go to school, by the end of the day, they haven't really learned much. So there's a lot we need to do in terms of retaining our girls in school, and boys as well as getting them to really learn. At the end of the day, they have to come out with good learning outcomes. So it's not just enough to get them in school, but we have to ensure that they are learning. In terms of accessing digital learning, I mean, the situation also doesn't look good. We know all the different challenges that girls face, and most of these things are with us, and we move from our families, community, to the school level, faced with those same challenges, because it's the same individuals, and it's the same kind of gender orientation we have. So in every sector that we move to, we tend to reflect it in everything, including the digital space. So you realize that for most of our schools, I mean, for primary schools, we are told by data from even MOE that a lot of these schools don't even have access to internet. Only 25% of our primary schools even have access to electricity to start with. And in terms of internet, is not even there at all for most of the schools. This makes access to digital learning very difficult for the entire school, and much worse for girls who normally feel very marginalized and are also very vulnerable. And due to their socialization, they are normally those that are not too confident to even access digital learning or utilize it, or even have the skill or experience it in any form. So I think that we still have a long way to go when it comes to accessing learning, and more especially accessing digital learning.
Moniratu, thank you so much. Linda, same question to you. Your thoughts on how many of our girls at this level have access to digital education, and what is our reality really when we interrogate the data on primary and secondary school education of girls in general?
Okay, I do agree with everything my fellow panelists said, but it looks like as much as we are not in a good space, a lot of work is being done on ground. After the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of organizations like MasterCard and UNICEF did a lot of work to try and bridge that gap. A lot of children, or all children, were out of school during the pandemic, and in collaboration with MasterCard and UNICEF, they were able to reach out to 9 million children through TV, radio, and other sources of digital education. The World Bank also did a lot and got about 4.45 million children access to digital education. When I did some research, I realized that some private organizations are also doing a good job of trying to get education to children, not only in the urban communities, but as well in the marginalized and rural communities. I'd like to, NISA Education, which offers mobile service education to kids, and you don't need a special kind of phone. You can use these ordinary phones that have simple access to internet, and then you can learn a lot of things. So as much as the situation is bad, I think there are a few organizations in collaboration with Ministry of Education that is doing a lot to try and bridge this gap. I do agree there's so much more we need to do. Private public collaboration will be the best way to resolve these issues, because we cannot depend on the government alone to solve these problems. That's why we have these private organizations who are doing the best that they can, creating infrastructure, setting themselves up so that when the need comes, the government can partner with them to reach out to more people. As the co-founder of STEM, one of our major focus is to bridge the gender gap in STEM. So if you're not the only ones fighting this battle, there are a lot of other organizations that came across Making Ghana Girls Great project that focuses on trying to teach a lot of girls and get education to a lot of girls in marginalized communities. I think in the moment they are in 72 schools across the country, which is great. I mean, it's a good start. So when I'm supposed to come up with a number, that would be hard. But I think as much as it's not in the best position or we are not there yet, I think a lot of work is being done towards getting education to
Linda, thank you so much. Let me bring Gifty. Let's maybe you can talk to us about some of the barriers and challenges that young girls face in terms of quality education and even further accessing digitally enabled learning. So you can give me your answer, then I'll take a quick word from Moniratu on the same question.
Okay, thank you so much, Nathan. I think in terms of barriers, there's quite a lot of literature, a lot of research out there. The sad truth is there's still the belief that perhaps educating a girl is a nice thing to do, but not really a necessity. Sadly, these things are still around. But I think core to our barriers is the belief systems and the cultural interpretations and the kind of preferences that are being placed on who gets an education in the family, and perhaps who do we push ourselves a little bit more for, and who needs to stay at home, and so on. I feel as if poverty plays a key issue. However, as my two fellow colleagues have just mentioned in their responses, that there is the element of free education. And so perhaps one might argue, is poverty still an issue? But still it is, because as Moniratu rightly put, there is that free education, but then the quality is being watered down a bit. And I feel that that's a barrier for girls accessing quality education. I also feel as if our girls do lack role models role models kind of guide them to encourage them, so to speak, because I do have a couple of experiences where, yes, we're offering free tuition, offering scholarship and everything, but yet girls are not able to join in for reasons, you know, as I've just mentioned about cultural kind of beliefs. And I feel there's so much work to be done. I also feel there's a barrier in terms of society itself stifling sometimes the ambition of girls or females. We tend to think, or perhaps to say, that certain aspects of the curriculum or career pathways should only be for boys, and that I feel that's not do good to what we want to create for our girls. There's also this barrier of gender stereotyping. So you can't do this, you shouldn't be doing that, you should be at home, perhaps taking care of the house chores or joining families in the markets or in the farms and so on. It goes on and on and on in terms of the challenges that our young girls face. And also there is this element also that why do we have to invest so much on the female child? I believe that there's so much to be done to educate parents as well on the value that should be placed on girls' education. And in terms of accessing digital learning, I mean, one of the key things I think, Munirat, you rightly touched on, is the affordability and accessibility of internet itself, because we all know when the pandemic struck, everybody had to begin learning via remote methods. And for most of our remote communities, perhaps, what did that look like for them? There's no internet coverage. Even if there was, what about affordability in them being able to engage with the learning? So I think those are also challenges and barriers. And even going down to basic things like how many of our females can use a mobile phone or do have access to a mobile phone, basic things like that. And I think these are all challenges for us to think about as we think about moving this way of learning and perhaps moving on education forward and for our girls. I also think that when we think about digital learning, we need to think about even the school setting, how equipped are libraries? Because if the students do not have the laptops or computers at home, or even the mobile phones at home to enable them, what do we have in our schools? Are schools equipped that the girls can join in and begin to learn those fundamentals? How do I even switch on a computer? How do I kind of access Word and type in a sample letter and so on? As those key elements that we all need as we progress through our career. So I think those are the key kind of barriers that I wanted to touch on, really. And I think as we continue to engage, one of the key elements that I think might be useful for us to perhaps think about is especially role models for our girls. And sometimes people want to pursue certain career pathways, but perhaps they have no guidance or no clear in-depth knowledge or understanding of what to do, who to speak to, where to even apply, because there's so many opportunities out there, but you can only access those if you are digitally literate and able to do so, and also if those resources are available for our girls to be using. So that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you so much, Gifty. Muniratu, I don't know if you have something to add to that in terms of the barriers and challenges young girls are facing, maybe in a few words.
Okay, thank you. I think Gifty has really captured this so well. And perhaps I would only add by sharing maybe some experiences that we've had that really go to throw more light on the challenges that exist in the system. I think Gifty mentioned perceptions and then cultural norms in her presentation. And then this is really very key. In most of the areas, that tends to, it really affects the way that girls access education and even access digital learning. We implemented a project some time back, which I think that Linda referred to earlier on, that was funded by FCDO. So this was a project that sought to improve learning outcomes of girls, especially in very deprived areas. So we had setups that sort of ensured that for every day that a child comes to school, the child would have access to a quality lesson at least. So what we did was to provide them with basic setup such that they were able to enjoy live lessons that were transmitted from a distance. And this really worked well. One of the challenges or barriers that really came to bear was the fact that in most of these situations, you would find that because of our own biases and sometimes even for the biases of teachers themselves, you would have a setup in the classroom. You have a class prefect who is supposed to support the teacher and then take care of the equipment. But because most often the prefects we would have in our classrooms tend to be males, they end up being the ones benefiting from the system because they would receive the training. They would be those that would facilitate sessions in the absence of the teacher, which just goes to show. So if you don't deal with the gender issues, tech itself will not be able to help. It would only come and then you reflect your own biases on it. And then you keep perpetuating the same thing. So realize that most of the boys had an advantage because there are those that would have the training, there are those that would be given the support, there are those that would access. Even currently in Comfort, in some areas that we work, most where tech facilities are inadequate, the few that are there goes to the boys because of our thinking that it is boys who are supposed to tech is supposed to be a masculine area, a male-dominated area. It is the men or boys in the classroom that should be handling such equipment. So all that are barriers that we really need to deal with. And especially where you have financial constraints, most often it is the girl that will tend to suffer. And we know for tech, it also has to do with finances. So wherever there's limited finance in terms of accessing these things, it is the boys who would get the advantage. And I think that even one other barrier also, which is very key, is the very low levels of digital literacy among teachers themselves, among school leaders, which also goes to just, which is also a key barrier because if a teacher in the school or the managers of the school themselves have low skills in this area, it becomes an issue. That is why after COVID-19, when schools resumed, I mean, even during the pandemic, when schools were closed and then when schools resumed, teachers were expected to take on digital learning and try to see how they can reach out, they'll be able to reach out to their students. But if you don't have the skills, how do you do that? So I think all these are barriers. Even infrastructure that is not developed in a way that it is very adaptable to our own setting. In the projects that I mentioned, we went as far as getting, for instance, system units that were developed to match the kind of environmental conditions that we had in such deprived areas. It was small and portable, then also able to withstand the environmental conditions, the dust and everything. So all this, if you don't go out of your way to develop the tech in a way that it really suits us, you may bring in technology that will not be able to fit into our own context. So I think these are all barriers and challenges that we face in the system.
Thank you so much, Muniratu. Let's move on. Let's hear from some young girls on what their experiences and challenges are around digital learning. We've had some great insights from our panel, but let's also hear from some of the young girls who have something to say on what they've experienced so far when it comes to digital learning.
My name is Marisa Ando, and my experience with digital enabled learning was complicated because we were going to write exams and we had to do most of the learning online. So even though it helped us in some ways, in regards with other subjects, it wasn't that efficient. With the digital enabled learning, I feel like they could improve issues with sound and connectivity, because I feel like sometimes, even though we are all online, somebody's sound could be off or somebody's sound could be on at the wrong times, and some people's sounds could be muted, some people's sounds could be on. So I feel like if they improved on the connectivity and the sound, it would really help. With learning online, I feel like the teachers were not able to finish what they were supposed to teach us because of the standard duration of time that the Zoom used. But with in-person learning, the teachers were able to extend their time and give us detailed analysis of what we are supposed to learn.
Hello, my name is Nana Konobia. Digitally enabled learning to me was new, and it was something to get used to because we're used to the face-to-face interaction. My biggest challenge would have to be I was in the waiting room for too long. Like, you be in the waiting room waiting on the teacher to invite you in. That was the only challenge. It was fairly okay. It was fairly okay, but the only improvement would be the waiting room for me. Now, to compare digital enabled learning to face-to-face interaction, the face-to-face was more intimate because the teacher was right there and it was personal. But on the plus side of digital enabled learning, you could pause and research on stuff, which wasn't really possible in school, because of the internet, so that was good.
Tech-enabled learning more accessible to girls. Let's talk about what's needed at the policy level. Muniratu, maybe in a few words, you can tell us what's exactly required at the policy level.
Okay. So I think that at a policy level, we will need to ensure that we are really developing very comprehensive policies that takes care of all these issues. We shouldn't wait and then gender or girls issues become an afterthought. I think that at the very onset of policy development, we would need to ensure that we've taken care of all the different dimensions of the society. Girls and boys learn differently. How do we ensure that we have a policy that really captures each of them? We have the rural and urban dimension. How do we ensure that whatever we are coming up with will be able to work for the rural folks and also for the urban students? So I think that we would need these key things in terms of policy. And I think also that we are very good in Ghana at developing policies, and sometimes the implementation, tracking of it, monitoring it becomes an issue. So I think that we would need to ensure that whatever policy we come up with, we are tracking it, we are monitoring, and we are ensuring that we review it periodically. And if anything needs to adapted or changed, we do so that we actually meeting the current realities on the ground. And I think also that for policy making also, we would need to look at the different levels of education and then the different needs at each level, given the factors that exist. For instance, if you take a basic level where even electricity is an issue, how do we ensure that they still have the kind of digital learning that would fit their situation? For secondary school level, at least they have some access to computers. Some of them have computer labs. How do we ensure that this is happening? At the teachers level, what do teachers need? Are we giving them the right skills? Are we giving them the right tools to work with? And I think that policy will need to also look at even content. We have a lot of content now post-COVID, and most of this sometimes will not necessarily be mapped to our existing curriculum, even though a lot of effort is being put into doing that to ensure that whatever digital content we have is being matched to our curriculum. So we have to ensure that that really happens. And I think that that side would have to be properly regulated. If it's going to be true policy, we have to ensure that whatever digital content our teachers and our students are accessing, it is really the right content and then giving them the right kind of learning that they need to do.
Thank you so much, Muniratu. Gifty, Muniratu mentioned content. From where you sit, what needs to be considered in terms of that kind of content I want to give to students who want to take up this digital path of learning?
Thank you. So as Muniratu rightly puts, it needs to be mapped clearly to the curriculum content that we are following here in Ghana. I think the content needs to be age appropriate. So a primary school pupil should have content, activities, task, resources that is relevant to their age group and to their curriculum. I think the content needs to reflect some elements to create opportunities for further reading. I think one of the things that I don't think we do quite well in schools is reading, and what we call flip learning, that you go and read ahead before you come to the session. And I think perhaps as we think about digital learning and growing our learning space, to think about opportunities for research or further reading, we also to think about content that reflects problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity, content that kind of creates those opportunities for our learners to engage in it and to continue to grow in that space, because we realize that sometimes, you know, students will be able to answer a straightforward question, but when you rephrase that same question into some sort of problem-solving puzzle kind of thing, they struggle to tease out what the key informations are. So I think our content needs to give room for our students to develop their creative thinking skills, to grow and develop into their problem-solving opportunities. I think the content needs to be carefully crafted that is not gender biased. So if you are giving an example, perhaps not to give an example of a female fetching water somewhere. I mean, males could also fetch water. I'm just giving a random example. But I feel as if we need to really think about some of those things as we develop the content. So content that reflects problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity opportunities. Content that incorporates reading, further opportunities for reading and research, content that is age appropriate and properly mapped and linked to the curriculum at every stage throughout the education system.
Thank you, Gifty. Linda, can you talk to us about what is required in terms of the design of Edtech platforms for digital learning?
Like one of the students mentioned, it didn't feel like it didn't feel interactive. So she felt okay. It didn't feel personal as well, because it was like the teacher was all the way there and she was all the way here. But if the platforms that are generated have a communication aspect to it, instant messaging, video calls. So in case the child has any questions, that child can immediately send that question to the teacher for a response. I think some of the features that can also be embedded is group work, because group work would foster some kind of community, right? If they feel like they're doing the work by themselves, they feel like they're isolated and all that. But in a group, they are able to ask each other questions, they're able to basically get ideas out of each other. So another feature I think would also help is if there's some kind of gamification, right? With my experience with teaching kids, I realized that when they feel like, okay, there's a badge to be won, or there's a coin to be won, there's something to be won, it motivates them to work hard. Using Zoom and all that is great, but I think we should work on a more customized platform that is focused on education, that can have all these features where the kids know that, okay, this environment is like school. I'm able to ask my fellow students questions. I'm able to ask my teacher questions whenever I don't understand anything. When I do very well, I get a badge. When I don't understand anything, I can even be have a special session with my teacher so that my teacher can explain things further to me. So I think special environments should be created outside Zoom and the ones that we already know to have these special features that would help the learning process be more interactive and feel like as much of a face-to-face as possible as compared to me being at home and my teacher being somewhere else.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda. Let's move on. Let's talk about special considerations that we need to make for girls vis-a-vis boys. Gifty, let me ask you what you feel about, what your thought is on the role of parents and teachers and what kind of support they can provide so that, girls are supported in this area. We are talking about special considerations we need to make for girls vis-a-vis boys in this path as we want to encourage more digital learning.
Thank you. I think it's the role of the teacher and the parent, I'll say, cannot be separated. I think they need to be working hand in hand and in synchrony. I think for teachers, you cannot impart anything that you do not know. So I think as teachers, we need to invest in our own kind of continuous professional development in ensuring that we are digitally literate. Because I remember when COVID struck and we had to do remote learning, we're running around learning how to use Teams and Zoom and all the other platforms out there. And we did lots and lots of CPDs. Have we stopped now, or are we continuing to look for other avenues to continue to sharpen and enhance our own skill set first before we are able to transfer that to the students? So I think continued professional development, us investing in our own kind of learning as teachers is quite key. I also think that in the school setting, boys and girls need to be given the same opportunity. I think Miniratu touched on that a number of times in different ways. Boys and girls need to be given equal opportunities in the school setting. There shouldn't be something that, oh, boys can do better than girls. In the ICT lab, could perhaps girls also become prefects or lead students to also set up and lead the sessions there. I also think that parents equally need to have a vested interest in upskilling themselves as well, because when you are at home and you have sometimes our children know so much about our phones than we do, and I think we really need to be invested in learning and being curious, and sometimes learning from them also will encourage them to know that, look, this is a good thing that I need to continue to engage in. I also think that parents need to see both the male and the female child, and they need to see them through the same lenses, so to speak, and at home be able to treat them equally. So I always give this example. Why would I buy a PlayStation for my son and perhaps buy a teddy bear for my daughter? Why not everybody share the PlayStation? And perhaps let's all be inquisitive and figure out how to do things. So I think at the home level, these are the things that we need to be thinking about. And also the things we say, the conversation we'll have at home, oh, this one you can't do this, or you should go to the market, and so on and so forth. So I think there's a body of work to be done in our communication with our children at home as well. There is also the need for us to challenge our children to be ambitious, challenge them to be inquisitive, challenge them to be curious. It is okay. I remember when growing up, you wouldn't touch the television, would you? But now it's got about 5, 6 remotes, and they know every channel more than we do. And I think that's a good thing for families to continue to encourage in their homes. But more importantly, I think there's still a huge body of work, I think I said it at the beginning, to be done to educate parents on the value of a girl's education. And Miniratu, you mentioned something at the beginning about the northern sector, and I think it's quite key that perhaps we intensify our education. I had a number of girls from the north who I was really looking forward to joining me, but were unable to, perhaps due to people not really understanding why they needed to partake of such a program in STEM and so on. So I think with parents, that there's still a huge body of work to be done there in education. So in a nutshell, all I'm saying is, as teachers, which I'm part of, we need to ensure that we are continuing to learn and to develop ourselves, so we're able to teach our students as well. Teachers need to give equal opportunities and create the environment for both boys and girls to continue to flourish within the areas of STEM and ICT and so on. Our parents also need to think about how they are balancing the treatments and the things, that the conversations, etc., that happens at the home level. We're talking also about in terms of what we need as teachers and what we need as parents to support this process. For me as teachers, I'll say, is that continuous professional development, willingness to learn, you know, and schools being able to support that, and teachers also personally being able to embark on those learning journeys by themselves, intrinsically motivated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gifty. Linda, briefly, can you tell us how we can maintain a sense of community and connection as we scale up the use of tech in education?
I'll say fostering a lot of group work, right? Creating the platform such that you don't feel like you're just in Ghana, but you can work with people all over the world. I believe that there are a lot of platforms that allow kids to interact with people all. I remember when we used to have pen pals when we were kids, you know, having to have someone all the way in America, you writing to that person, you expressing your experiences and learning about their experience. Those things went a long way to improve our sense of creativity, even made us more audacious, right? Because you felt that, okay, I'm not the only one, but the girl in America also has the same challenges or similar challenges like I. And so creating these platforms such that kids can interact with other kids outside their geography, outside their religion, outside, you know, all these things, can help them from feeling isolated, from feeling like they're alone, but know that there's a bigger world out there and they can learn from other people. So I think what we can do as creators is that we can create platforms that give access to the kids of other countries or other nationalities, other religions and whatnot. So the kids don't feel like they're all by themselves.
Thank you so much. Linda, if you just tuned in, this is Edtech Monday for the month of October. We are talking about advancing girls' education through digital learning. I have Gifty Ganza with me, head teacher of the African Science Academy. I've got Miss Munira Tuisifu, Programs Director of Camfed Ghana, and Linda Anson, co-founder of STEM Bees. Let's move it on. We are in the final throes of our conversation. Munira, so just briefly in a few words, how do we ensure that we are creating the right platforms and policies that support girls in different contexts? We are talking girls in rural areas, refugees with disabilities, just girls of various contexts. How do we ensure that we are creating the right platforms and policies to support all these girls who are in different contexts?
I think that we need to ensure that girls or females are actually part of all these processes, because once they are involved themselves, they're able to bring to bear the differences that exist and then what will really work for girls. So I think that is really important that we are really involving girls themselves as we create these platforms and policies. And I think we would also have to ensure that we would need to also ensure that the digital environment is made very safe for girls. I mean, there's a lot happening digitally, and most of the violence that we see girls go through in our physical world seem to be translated onto the digital world as well. So I think that we'll need to ensure that in platforms and policies that we look at, we are really ensuring safety so that girls are more or better encouraged to be able to get involved. And I think also that there were a number of things that that needs to happen. I think that in terms of collaborative work in creating whatever platform, we need to ensure that it is done in a very collaborative way because girls' issues really cut across and sometimes different sectors, even digital learning also cuts across. So we need to ensure that, I mean, all the relevant agencies are brought together. If you take Ministry of Education, of course, leads education, but we have Ministry of Communication, which also have to do with digitalization. So it's very important that we are creating these collaborations that would ensure that we girls are supported in a way that would really enhance their learning. And I think also that, as I mentioned earlier on, just ensuring that we are actually mainstreaming gender into most of these areas, because that's where you are really dealing with the roots of the problems. You are not waiting to later find quick fixes here and there. You're actually ensuring that whatever platforms or policies that you are creating, everything gets integrated. I think that in the policy space, we've had an ICT policy, I think that was around 2005. And then around 2015, we've had some reforms in ICT, but currently all that is being reviewed and put together to come up with a very comprehensive ICT policy for education in Ghana. And I think that it will be good if all relevant stakeholders are involved to ensure that we are consulting the right people, everybody gets involved. We have CENLOS that is supposed to be in charge of ICT in education in Ghana. And I think that I've seen them do quite a number of things like iBoxes, iCampuses, which is really very good. And I think those are the kind of platforms or tools that we really need to make some progress in the space. And I think those are all laudable things that can happen. One other thing also that I think can happen is in terms of, I think earlier on Linda mentioned, Gifty mentioned role models. I think is really, really very important. We need to encourage most of our girls to go into the sciences, because that's the only way they can really get involved in the creation of digital learning. And we have to start this right from childhood when they are still small to ensure that we really inspire them and inculcate that, generates the interest at that level, so that by the time they get to junior high level, at least they have developed the interest. They've seen a lot of role models in that space that they want to aspire to, and then they are able to take that on board, and we increase the numbers of girls that we have in that space. Quickly, in Comfort, what we do is we have resource centers that are located in communities that we work in, and these have proved to be very helpful. We have their ICT resource centers where we have a lot of content in our content service, and in addition, we have videos that we provide, and videos on role models, because sometimes it's difficult to get these role models to go to the lowest level to interact with them. So we create these videos and keep them at the community levels, and the girls are able to watch them for inspiration. So these are all things that we can do.
Okay, thank you so much, Muniratu. Linda, just in a few minutes or in a minute, just tell us what kind of support and partnerships do we require to ensure that the Ghanaian girl has access to quality digital learning?
Support and partnerships. So we need a lot of, as I said previously, private-public partnerships. There are lots of private organizations trying to help in solving this problem, but sometimes due to lack of funding and lack of access to resources, it becomes very difficult. Then if there's a public-private partnership, like what MasterCard and UNICEF is doing, together we are able to reach out to a lot more children. We are able to build better and safer platforms for kids. Because one thing I also realized is an important thing that we have to look at that sometimes we don't, is creating a safe space for girls to learn. Digitally and online, girls are more likely to be abused. And so we have to make sure that these platforms that we are creating have that safe space, that the girl child feels safe to be on there to learn, so that when they're there, they can actually learn and learn well. And so having safeguarding considerations and policies in place in these digital platforms will be a very important thing to look at. So yes, having a private-public partnership, having the government, these big organizations such as MasterCard, UNICEF, and whatnot, partnering with the smaller ones to reach out to more kids would go a long way to helping solve this problem of gender gap in digital literacy.
Thank you so much. Let's wrap it up. In a minute each, let me take final thoughts from everybody on what needs to be done to ensure that this is not just another talk show, but we would like to see increased action by implementers of policy across Ghana. Gifty, let me start off with you, and then I talk to Linda and then Munira too.
Thank you very much. Well, I think that we need to perhaps move the actions in chunks. Sometimes the policies are quite broad and then it kind of get lost in between somewhere. But if we take things in chunks, for example, let's think about our ICT in schools and perhaps just take it in zones and focus on, is it well equipped? What do we need? You know, thinking about CPDs for teachers, how would that look like on a year-to-year basis on the school calendars? How would that look like? So I think chunking bits of the policies and perhaps making the actions measurable, things that we could say, okay, year one, we're focusing on perhaps the northern sector and what does that look like and so on. I think that would be my thing for policymakers, not to go with all the broad ideas, but chunk them and let's measure impact in stages.
Linda?
I'll say building infrastructure and training teachers, because as Munira mentioned, as well as Gifty, the teachers are the core of this whole thing. If you don't have competent teachers who really understand what we're doing, it will be difficult to roll out these, and without the infrastructure, it will be difficult to do it. So I think what we can do to move from just it being policy to actually implementing what we're talking about, getting the infrastructure in place, that is having electricity in schools and having internet access, and all those things in place, as well as training the teachers to be well equipped to be able to actually roll out these things that we are coming up with in these policies. I think those are the two main things for me that need to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Munira, you have the final word in a minute, please.
Okay, so I think in addition to all that has been said, I would say that proper coordination of interventions. I think that there's a lot that is happening, especially post-COVID, but most of it are very disjointed, very much in silos. So I think that's actually coordinating all that is happening to ensure that we are really seeing the effects or impacts in a way that can really bring the change that we want. So I think that that would be my last thing, proper coordination of all intervention and efforts in that space to ensure that we are measuring ourselves well, and we are not also repeating things. I mean, resources are already scarce. So when you do proper coordination, you ensure that you really put the resources where they are needed.
Thank you so much. That was a very, very insightful conversation, very detailed, very educative. I've been speaking to Gifty Ganza, head teacher of the African, Miss Munira Isifu, Programs Director at Comfort Ghana. And I also had Linda Anson, co-founder of STEM Bees. These wonderful ladies joined me this morning or today on the October 7th of Edtech Monday, and we're talking about advancing girls' education through digital learning. Now, don't forget that Edtech Monday is a platform for Edtech entrepreneurs, education stakeholders, and government reps to facilitate critical conversations on the use of technology for teaching and learning. The show is an initiative of the MasterCard Foundation's Regional Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in ICT, and part of the foundation's strategy to find solutions to Africa's youth employment by closing the gap in access to quality education and advancing the integration of technology in education spaces and practices across Africa. Now, Edtech Monday is brought to you by the MasterCard Foundation, and they partner with MEST Africa. And Edtech Monday airs every last Monday of every month. And you listen to it live on the City Breakfast Show, and you also watched it live on City FM's Facebook page, City 97.3 FM, and on MEST Africa's Facebook page as well. My name is Nathan Carl, the moderator for the session. Many, many thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your time. Next is the City News